All right, after lunch crew. So I'm Larry Fretz. I'm the global managing partner for Infotech Research Group. I run our gaming, hospitality, sports entertainment business. And I'm joined today by three fantastic panelists. I'll just do a quick introduction, but to my left is Michael Caruso. He's the Director of Commercial Business Casinos at BluIP. And Michael has over 30 years of experience in technology systems focused on the casino and hospitality industry. To his left, I'm then joined by Nasim Binesh, who's the Director of RAISE, which is the responsible AI in society. Her work covers AI ethics and responsible innovations to designing advanced models that can tackle and solve some of the hardest problems in the hospitality and gaming industry. And then last, but certainly not least on the end there, is Mark Fancourt. He is based in Las Vegas and is the co-founder of TravHotech. I always have a tough time saying that name, Mark. A specialist technology consultancy bringing just over 3 decades of industry experience focused on hospitality and travel industries. So what we want to talk about today is actually, before we dive in, just maybe a quick raise of hands, a quick little poll here. How many people have gone to Vegas in, say, the last 6 months to a year?
Thank you.
Wow, pleasant surprise. Variation on that question is, how many of you went and actually gambled, played in the casino? All right, fewer hands. And then how many went for hotel, food, or a sporting event, or a theater type show? All right, so generally the remaining half. All right, so we're going to not quite give you all the secrets, but we are definitely going to talk about casinos and obviously AI. So the first question I have is really going to be for Michael, but the AI and AI agents, as we've heard throughout the sessions today and over time, they need to be able to both know something and do something. So the question that the million-dollar question, literally, in many cases, is, should I buy or build all of that or pieces of that? And am I going to go out with to a hyperscaler like an Azure or AWS, or am I going to, and am I better off focusing on something that's much more industry specific?
Well, first of all, on behalf of Vegas, thank you for coming. Everything you've read is wrong. We're doing fine. Everything's fine in Vegas. So bring your money and come and visit us. So in answer to that question, it depends. It depends on the stakeholders within the business, what their objectives are, how large the company is. There are billion-dollar casino companies, as well as multi-million-dollar casino companies. And the reason I say that is the experience that we've seen is that there may be stakeholders within the business that might go to a hyperscaler because they have relationships with the hyperscaler. The rest of their business is up at Amazon or in Microsoft. So they feel solving problems like HR onboarding or developing some sort of AI model to look at their 10Ks over a period of time or look at trends of something. That might be the right use case to use a hyperscaler. But when you go hyperscaler, you have to decide who is the system integrator that they're going to use. You have to teach them about the business. You have to give them the use cases, or they have to figure out the use cases. They have to build the integrations. They have to test all of that. And that's time, and that's money. So if you have the time and the money and the center of excellence set up within your organization, then you can go hyperscaler route. On the other side, if you're thinking about deploying AI for simple customer service use cases, CX, you want to deflect business through a certain channel, there are plenty of companies, including BluIP, which I represent, that have built out all the use cases, that have all the integrations done. They've tested the models. They work with most of the other systems within the gaming industry. They're certified. And you can get to those production LLMs very quickly. So that's kind of my comparison of the two.
Mark and Nasim, any view on build versus buy, or how to get that specialized industry context versus the sort of the do general AI? Any thoughts?
Well, actually, there was something that the previous speaker was also pointing out. I wanted to just add fun fact. That intro about me was wrote by ChatGPT, and it didn't let me down. So I think when it comes to bringing different, I should say, cultural, diversity into what your model does, it all goes back to the data. So depending on what type of data you're going to be using, you're going to be getting the results based on that. That's why we say garbage in, garbage out. And for example, if you wanted to be representing certain parts of the population, you want to make sure that your data is actually targeting those people. So you want to have some specific data about those people within your data set to be able to pick on those. And pretty much when it comes to consumer behavior, it's going to be the same thing. Like Ravi was talking about, like in Saudi Arabia, I'm sure that the population there is going to be having different trends when it comes to their choices and their preferences compared to what we see in North America, for example.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I think probably the big difference looking at hospitality, sort of core hospitality and then gaming hospitality, is scale. And scale applies in all aspects, particularly in the technology space. So, one of the things that the gaming operators have had for a long time is enterprise grade CRM platforms. They've had the concept of service buses for 2 decades. So their ability to consolidate and move information is probably a little more progressed than we find generally in sort of broader hospitalities, with probably the major companies aside of that. So it gives them some pretty significant opportunities in the coming world that we're all here to discuss, in terms of how they can improve the customer experience beyond what it exists today. Now, the flip side of that, of course, is that scale is also one of the biggest challenges that places like Las Vegas have. So we talk about the opportunity to drive personalization or give you a more personalized customer experience. That's very difficult in the Las Vegas market. And part of the reason for that is that there's a lot of fragmentation in the various silos of businesses that integrated resorts or large casino operations have. Now, are there similarities to that in mainstream hospitality? Absolutely. It's just that in the gaming sector, we add on gambling, right? And we add on sort of large-scale entertainment as a couple of additional products that we don't always find in sort of resort-type hospitality. So the other thing that often happens in these environments is that they tend to buy platforms from big companies. So the likes of Salesforce, the likes of Adobe, large enterprises like that doing business with large enterprises is something that we see more in the gaming space than we might do in sort of the majority of the hospitality industry. So they can take platforms, but they usually have the resources to do something with it as well. For example, MGM Resorts technology team, last I knew, was 600 people for a street of business, if you like, right? So there wouldn't be too many technology teams in the hospitality industry with hundreds of resorts around the world that add up to 600. So the scale has a big impact on what they're capable of doing and the type of technology that they can bring in.
And I just want to build on that for a bit, because you touched on that casinos. Really, the more modern term is integrated resort, right? It's a casino.
Or not so integrated.
It's a casino. It's entertainment. It's F&B, and it's of course the hotel. And to your point about scale, these are businesses amongst themselves, but they're all under one roof. And it's not limited to just the Vegas experience, but there's other examples where you then have different brands, you have different, there are different businesses, different departments. So yeah, different owners in some cases. So how do you deploy? How would you recommend, and what are you seeing on the deployment of AI to ultimately, and we've heard a lot about this today, to either drive revenue, drive out costs, or enhance that experience when you have what are, in many cases, completely siloed businesses under one brand or under one roof? Like, how do you go about that?
No, it's a great question. I think, I think maybe I'll frame it up in saying that there are two experiences, right? There's the digital experience, which is essentially crafted as to what the customer thinks is going to happen, and then there's the physical experience where, many of you have been, that being recognised in Vegas is not something that sort of comes traditionally with the business as a general rule. And as Larry pointed out, and for those of you who may not know, some of the big companies actually don't run that much of the actual integrated resort, right? So they're outsourced food and beverage operations, outsourced event management operations, and often it comes down to really only the gaming floor and the rooms that they actually execute on their own, right? Which is quite different to mainstream hospitality, where you tend to do all of it. So the challenge, as you pointed out, is how do we consolidate information across different companies, basically, because that's what it is more often than not. Now, they've worked very hard on their loyalty platforms, right, which give them some visibility across all of the spend that they get across all of those different businesses. So I guess from a customer visibility perspective, there's some reasonable progress there, but the challenge is probably more going back the other way, Larry, because whilst they have the enterprise information, and certainly those of you who are gamblers and any of you who are gamblers at scale understand the concept of a casino host who makes sure that you continue to gamble at scale, right? It sort of stops there today. The big opportunity for the industry, of course, is to get that broader visibility and get that data consolidation, and this is where artificial intelligence will come into play through intelligence around that empirical information that many of them sort of already have now, to drive customer experiences towards certain products and services that suit them, or match their individual personalised preferences or consumption patterns, if you like. So with all of that, the challenge remains, how do we get that down to the average line level employee who knows that Larry is the person that's standing in front of me? And there are certain applications of technology that can come even through some of the CRM platforms today, although it's still a little bit complex because they have so many systems to juggle. And at the moment, I think many of you would probably agree from your own experiences that you don't really get the recognition that you probably should, considering the spend that's actually taking place in Las Vegas today. So I think that's the last gap that really has to be filled in terms of turning the digital experience, which seems somewhat holistic, into an actual in-person fulfillment experience across all the different business types.
I mean, it really comes back to what we've heard about that AI needs to know, right? It needs to have that context about the person, just like we heard in the session prior to us.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to quickly add that, one of the things that if you don't sort of understand the gaming side of the business, they tend to have significant information about the customers for the obvious reasons, right? And if you're a slot gaming player, they know everything they need to know about you. They know what you play, where you play, when you play, how much you bet, what times, when you lose, when you win, and so on and so forth. So it's very detailed. They've always had that empirical data for a long time now. Table gaming, not quite to the same level, but it's there, right? Taking that experience that they have and moving that across the business is the next big opportunity for this part of the industry, and driving revenue more so than optimizing revenue because of the knowledge that they have about individuals and their own personal behaviour.
But you bring up a good point, and I think we've heard pieces of this as well. And unfortunately, Delta is the most recent example that I'm going to cite here. But they were in the headlines last week, I believe it was, maybe a couple weeks ago, about what they're now essentially yielding their seats based on personalized information about the person buying that, or at least that's what the headlines are, right? Casinos are driven by randomness, right? The random number generators on the slot machines. It's a question we get asked all the time, going, "Ooh, is AI going to tell, going to start telling, and awarding or not?" But there's randomness on the slot floor. It's all based on math as well across the entire property, and there's this concept of privileged license, right? Highly regulated businesses with heavy, in most jurisdictions, regulatory oversight. So the question then really is, as we see AI penetrate more roles and different parts of that journey across the entire integrated resort, how can we reconcile that or manage that with sort of the trust and ethics, right? Because the fact that we get asked all the time going, "Oh, how is this payout on a slot machine, is it determined?" There's an inherent lack of trust with AI, and then you're layering in the casino side of it, the randomness side of it. So how do we reconcile AI with the regulatory, the math, the randomness, and help establish trust with the players on the floor in an ethical way? And this is for Mark, but I think we'll just go. Then we'll go to Nasim and Michael on this.
Well, I mean, do you want to answer that first?
Okay, yeah, Nasim, yeah, please.
Well, this is a point in my class. I start with the pop quiz because I see people are kind of falling asleep. So, so this is like pretty much all of my research is all about AI ethics and trust and building that. But I wanted to ask you one question of all the people that have gambled in the past. Did you feel that you could trust the casinos with like whatever, game that you were gambling on? You're nodding. Okay. So I see that, a lot of people at least feel some element of trust going on there, right? But how many of you trust the output that comes out of a, let's say, ChatGPT model? Do you trust that? Right? Yeah. So I think what it comes in there is like, because we all see pretty much machine learning models more like a black box, right? And the reason behind it is it's really hard to explain what's going on within that system, right? Pretty much throughout all of the sessions today, we talked about how much data is being generated every day by everybody. Like the watches that you wear, it's, kind of keeping track of all of our biomedical data. The Roomba in your homes kind of knows what you're doing all the time. And then add to that element recently ChatGPT that kind of pretty much knows the person that it's chatting with, right? When it comes to the casino operations, we've seen that AI can be a great tool, like any other technology. It can be a double-edged sword. It can bring protection and security, but at the same time, it can raise some sort of, I should say, questions regarding trust and ethics that you were just talking about. And this is one of the things that I've been trying to do. So recently, I developed a technology that goes beyond this just looking into the, I should say, financial transactions, and that has become pretty much a threshold for detecting problem gamblers. And it kind of brings other elements into the play. It's pending patent, so I cannot obviously share all of the details today. But what AI can do is marvelous because it can detect anomaly and it can detect subtle changes in the data that other models cannot do that. And that becomes very fascinating because when we are talking about personalization today, we can talk about as like slightest and most granular way that you can think of, like what I like compared to the person that is like sitting here, or like what Mark likes is going to be completely different, right? And we can do the same thing within the casino operations as well. But when it comes to the ethical aspects of that is like how much of that is actually ethical. So how we can actually implement that system in a way that is considered ethical. And that's why I've been trying to work with the regulatory boards and also operators to kind of bridge this gap as an expert that can bring the know-hows of how AI system works and how the behavioral science behind that works, and kind of mend these two worlds together to create better AI systems for the future.
Yeah, I think just to pick up on that, and Larry, I think partly to the thrust of your question. So some of you may or may not realise, but under the regulations in the gaming environment, it dictates how information can be stored and where it can be shared. So pretty much for the most part, gaming information can't be shared. And going back to Larry's point was, well, okay, we can't really share the gaming information, and then we have the sort of core hospitality information. How do we put that together legally, basically, under a legal framework for the industry and be able to use it to do some of the things that Nasim and we've been talking about today? So, I think it probably remains still quite difficult, Larry, because I don't think there's been any real change in regulation to loosen that at all. But going back to the discussion about the government legislation on it, I think it'd be very interesting to see what happens in the coming few years in terms of whether the gaming industry gets a little bit more latitude to more effectively use information versus the restrictions that they have today. So I think that's probably, we'll have to wait and see. Can the information be consolidated? Well, we all know we can consolidate information, right? But hospitality is not stuck behind the regulations that the gaming sector is, and that does have an impact on how much you can do.
And I think just there's sort of a data flow, to your point, right? Like there's the game, the slot game itself, which is generally a hardened, random number, but everything that happens on that game is fed to a server, and that's the data that where you're seeing AI being used is to notice and present bonuses and offers on the game. And when I say on the game, on the screen of the game. So there is this sort of firewall between the two, but what's happening is, you've gone from, max bet to, just 5 cents as an example. You're changing your betting pattern to Nasim's point. I'm going to throw you another bonus to try to get some more share of your wallet, and that's where the ethical component comes in. And so again, Nasim, it's really, there's a lot of different solutions out there that are using AI to look at those little patterns. But how would you then take that, or how do you see it, or recommend and incorporate that into an operational intervention ladder, right? So because data is being captured, there's something responsible gaming, safe gaming, the know your limit, play within a type of mindset. How can you then take that data to sort of unobtrusively address that negative gaming experience that somebody may be undergoing? So how do you integrate that into the process, the human process that's still needed?
Well, the fast answer to that is invest in my technology. But so seriously, I really like what you said. The analogy, I think, is kind of where, like, you can call it Netflix for gamblers, right? When you're playing, it has kind of everything, every information about every type of game that you've played so far and what you liked, and that's why I was saying that it can become also a little bit risky, like, because it can also push people that have some problem gambling tendencies into spending more money. I think at this point, based on the situation we're at and the lack we see on the regulatory side, until we kind of bridge that, I would say operators have to be very careful about the technology that they invest in, because there are a lot of companies that kind of use AI to some extent, but in a sense it's been used more as like a buzzword so much. So it's really hard to kind of prove that it actually brings any revenue sometimes, right? So I think a lot of companies are trying to be more transparent about how their models are working and creating more like explainable AI, as we call it today. And I think it's going to be a great step moving forward. And in a sense, I think when it comes to the regulatory side, I can see compliance being the big part of it. So trying to come up with ways that we can kind of track what's going on, at least within those systems, which is, by the way, something else I'm working on. And on the operator side, I would say they should bring the safety element for the for the players and also the compliance, and then kind of provide both of the two, because without that you cannot be credible, and without that you're not going to be, I should say, trustworthy. So that's what the players want to see, and also I think for the overall industry it's going to be a great future landscape bringing AI in.
I was just going to add to, just going back to Doug's session before, and you know, obviously digital wallet is a big thing for the gaming sector, and wanting to see the introduction of that. I think that the combination of you know, some level of self-managed identity and digital wallet's going to change a lot for the gaming sector as well in a positive way. You know, the consumer having much more control over how much they want to interact with some of these environments, and you know, the potential financial implications of it.
Just last minute to Michael. What are you seeing in hospitality and gaming as sort of the top use case for AI in the environments you're deploying into and the solutions you're deploying? What's that top use case you're seeing, and what's maybe the one big sort of final word of insight for anybody looking at deploying something like that?
The top use case that we talk to casino resorts about all the time is anywhere where they have a lot of traffic, asking repetitive questions that they can deflect to a digital agent. That's a simple question. And that's mostly on the voice channel. It's mostly inbound calls or calls from a 5,000 room resort. You get people pressing that customer service button from their phones. So voice traffic, and the use case is, tell me about your resort, tell me what time check-in is, can I check in early, can I bring a dog, who's playing in the showroom, is Celine there today, can I get show tickets, anything like that. They want to deflect from the front desk, from operators, agents, housekeeping, you name it. Do you know, in Vegas, one of the top use cases that we're being asked to automate, anyone guess what it might be in Vegas if you've been? It is, can you send me a copy of my checkout folio? Because they're not at Hilton's, they're not Hyatt's, they're not Marriott's, they're not brands, you don't have an app. If you did download an app, maybe you can get it, but most of you have to expense your travel. So we're seeing automating guest folio requests as one of the top use cases.
Thank you. Well, I think we're out of time, unfortunately. If you have any questions, we'll be around after this, and thank you very much. Thanks to the panel.